Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
Omari No Doubt Sankofa, as
Omari
Derek
No
Brown.
Doubt Sankofa.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And if you hear a little giggle in my voice, it's because as Wes was counting us down, yes, Wes counts me down to open the episode. He gave me the 5, 4, and then back to 5 instead of down to 3. And I got real frazzled all of a sudden on what we are doing. But make sure you're listening to Wes over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel. He's over there with Blake Silverman. They're doing great work. But today on the Pistons Pulse, we get our man Shawn Windsor from the Detroit Free Press joining us, talk Pistons offseason. We're getting close to training camp, preseason, all of that. We'll have Shawn here for about 30 minutes, and then we'll finish off the episode with some questions. Shawn, how are you doing?
Not too bad. It was great to join you guys. I can't believe camp's, a week away? Less than a week?
Yeah, week and a half or so, September 30th. So right around the corner.
Week and a half. Okay.
How's your summer been, Shawn? I haven't seen you in a little bit. How's your summer been? Have you had anything good to eat lately?
No, not too bad. Busy. I mean, obviously we're in football season, so
yeah.
Michigan State, the Lions. I guess I should probably reverse that and start with the Lions, right? But no, that's busy. The Tigers are making a little bit of run, so I did get some vacation time this summer, so that's always good. But yeah, busy as ever.
Real quick before we get started, Omari, I do want to shout out James Edwards III. YouTube user says Omari lost his travel buddy on the beat. Obviously, most people know James. I guess if you're not on Twitter, maybe you don't, but James is going to cover the Knicks beat for The Athletic. I believe Fred Katz is moving on to cover the NBA in general for The Athletic. So, Omari, you got all sorts of new travel people. Like, you're the elder statesman on the beat for the Pistons, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. This is going to be year 5 on the Pistons, and the only one who's been there longer is Keith. You know, obviously he writes for Pistons.com, but it feels weird. Like, it's like I turned 30 this year, and now I'm like the longest tenured beat writer. Like, I'm about to have to start like seeing if I have braids in my beard and, you know, any patches on top of my head. I'm getting to that point now in life. Elder statesman.
Yep, you're going to hold it down, though. Be interesting to see who they get. Obviously, we don't know, but just wish James the best. But let's get into this. Shawn, where are you at right now with the offseason? I think we brought you on right after some of the free agency moves had happened. The draft had happened. Summer League had not happened. So you got, not that we can take a ton away from Summer League, but where are you just at big picture? Let's go mile high view of this roster and where it stands right now.
Yeah, I guess I'd start where probably all would start. I want to see what Cade can do with shooting and veteran shooting in particular, right? I mean, this is probably the most balanced roster, at least on the offensive end, that he's had. You know, the two-way is a different issue. A couple of them, I mean, Beasley can play a little bit of defense. Hardaway probably not so much, but from Tecchio, again, you know, he's okay defensively. But Tobias Harris, I'm just anxious to see what that's going to look like. I'm trying to think, who's the best vet he's played? I mean, Bogdanovich, I guess, but he was hurt so much.
Jeremy Grant,
go back to Jeremy Grant, and he was a rookie at that point. So to me, that's where it starts. What is it? I mean, he had a really good second half of the year last year. Obviously, I know Omari's documented that. Everybody's documented that, obviously. But that's to me where it starts. How good can this guy be? And I feel like we're going to get the best sense we've had of just what his ceiling is going to be. This, to me, because of the pieces around it.
Shawn, this is the best Detroit Pistons roster since when? What year? Or do you feel like it's TBD?
Yeah, it's kind of TBD. I mean,
I didn't want to give you a bailout, though. I was going to wait a few seconds to see if you answered. I gave you a bailout.
It depends on how much Harris has left in the tank. Hardaway's injury prone. I mean, if you want to be negative, right? Malik Beasley is a nice role player, but in terms of the fit and in terms of the other young guys who you hope, if you're a Pistons fan, obviously the organization could take a leap. I'm thinking in particular about Duren and Ivey, and to some degree Thompson. Yeah, it's potentially the best roster since Cunningham's been here. I mean, I know that's not that long. He's been there, which is his 4th year. So I would say it's the best roster since he's been here.
Where are you at with Cade in terms of, he gets this extension? I feel like I've heard some national media podcasts, I don't want to say question it, Shawn, but you can kind of tell in the way they talk about it. They're like, man, teams are just gifting out these rookie max extensions to guys who haven't done a whole lot. I don't know that people realize what Cade did last year, just even the counting stats. I know the win-loss is always a thing that people point to, but I'm with you. I want to see what he does with the floor spacing, but what do you want to see from Cade? What would be a year where you're like, yeah, this is a win for the Pistons, assuming that floor spacing is real and some of the veterans that we think are going to contribute, go ahead and contribute and stay healthy. What's a win for Cade this year?
To me, if his scoring and assist numbers stay the same, what were they? 24 and 7 or so the last
22.7 and 7.5. And that was like, he was one of 5 or I did this trivia, Omari. Shawn, I think Cade was one of 5 or 6 guys to average 22 and 7 last year. I don't think people realize that.
And it's a little higher if you take the back half, or at least the last 40 games, probably for sure, right? Omari would know that better, but 24 and 7. So to me, to maintain that and then get that overall shooting up to, what was he, mid-40s? Get that up.
45 and 36 from the 3-point line.
You want to see that up closer to 50. And then I don't know if he can get the 3-point to 40, but if you can get to 38, if you're at 50, 38, and just to increase the efficiency a little bit, the finishing sometimes, I think for the folks that watch the team, they know this better than anybody. Obviously, maybe not. Maybe the coaches know better than anybody, but can he power through in the fourth quarter? Right? Can he finish games? Because we feel like he's got some clutch qualities to him. It's not the psychological part. It's the strength and endurance. Right? That's so you'd like to see a little bit more of that. Maybe finding a little more balance in terms of when to shoot, when to pass, when to get certain guys shots. He's going to have more options in terms of shooters. So that's going to take a little bit for him to figure out. I mean, he's got, new guys again, but so yeah, no, to me, I want to see the efficiency increase a little bit more. And then the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game, those will be the 2 biggest areas.
Of the young guys, who are you? Well, I don't want to say who are you most excited to see, but which guy are you most intrigued by, just from the standpoint of, obviously, for the Pistons to take this next step, one of those guys in some capacity is going to have to take a leap. When you're looking at next season specifically, which guy do you think could sort of fill that role, or maybe is closest to filling that role?
I think of Bickerstaff and his staff, JB Bickerstaff and his staff, can get Jalen Duren to keep his head on the swivel on the defensive end a little bit of weak side rim protection. Obviously, he's got the physical gifts to get out and defend the ball screens reasonably well. Yeah, but to me, if he can take a leap defensively, and we're talking about endurance with Cunningham, it's a bigger issue with Duren to me. So yeah, to see if, and I know it's harder for big guys, especially young big guys, but I would think if he can improve defensively, he's got offensive rebound with the lob threat. He's got some ball skill too. I mean, can he knock down a 12-foot jump shot? Maybe you don't want to live with that, but does he develop an elbow shot? I know that's kind of an old, out of style analytic shot, but it can be effective too. I mean, Anthony Davis makes that shot, right, from time to time. It's not just on the block. And I'm not saying he's going to be Anthony Davis defensively, but yeah, to me, that'd be he's the one I'm most intrigued with this new coaching staff. Obviously, Ivey's right there, but I'm just really curious to see if Duren can learn how to start defending.
So thank you to everybody joining and watching live right now. If you guys have any questions, send them in the chat. We'll probably wait and get to those at the end of the episode after Shawn has to leave us and it's just Omari and I. Shawn, I want to stay on Jalen Duren. You mentioned the defense. I think a lot of people talk about that, wanting to see that improvement. Hopefully JB is able to do that with him and a few other guys in the defense in general for this team, him and his staff. What would be something offensively? You mentioned the elbow jumper. You mentioned having a little bit of ball skills, the lob. Is there something offensively where you're like, man, if he could do this, it would be really exciting? Or if he took another jump, whether it's in the ball screen, the mid-range jumper, the passing, is there something specifically on the offensive end with JD that you would like to see grow just a little bit in year 3?
Yeah, I mean, I can envision him, and we've seen a glimpse of this here and there, but I can envision him. So if he gets the ball on the wing, I don't know, 14 feet out, maybe even the baseline too. If he's getting it, and I don't know if it's going to come on a swing or not, but let's just say he gets the ball on the wing. Can he take 1 or 2 dribbles, or can he start with 1 foot and then, jab and then go the other? Because I know that's what guards do, or wings. I think he can maybe do that on a fairly simplified level. So can he get the ball facing the basket and take one or two dribbles and get to the rim. Because I think he's got that potential. And he doesn't have to go back with the dribble, but can he take one dribble, swivel his hips, change direction a little bit? We saw that a few times last year, right? Not consistently, but that would be fun to see a sort of a face-up game. I go back to Dwayne Casey, the night that was a draft, not draft night. It was the night or two after he was drafted, and he met. I think he spoke. Did he meet in a Detroit park somewhere? Omari, my memory fades me.
Yeah, the Rouge Park. I think the press conference was at Rouge Park.
Yeah, it was really hot. Everybody was really sweaty.
Yeah, my phone overheated. I couldn't tweet, couldn't take photos. It was pretty bad.
Yeah. So I think that was it, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm getting my summers confused. But I remember Casey mentioning Shawn Kemp, and obviously the athleticism. I don't know that he's quite that vertically explosive, but where I saw it was just that Kemp could score with his face in the basket, not from all the way out. He wasn't going to sit out there and dance, but he was decisive. And can Duren develop a little bit of that? Again, I hate to keep mentioning Anthony Davis, but he can do that a little bit. And I don't see why Duren can't.
I just found the clip as you were talking. He said it at Summer League also. It's on the broadcast, and Casey's talking about Duren, and he mentions that he compares him to Shawn Kemp. So you're spot on there, Shawn.
Yeah, you just saw that last year. I mean, I don't know if he's ever. I mean, he's not going to be Jokic on the block. He's got decent footwork, but you can get better at that. Obviously, you can rep that out, practice that. But a lot of that's just feel with the back to the basket. He can be solid down there. But what do you guys think? I think he's got hit a mid-range jumper and maybe a dribble or two and get to the rim as a third option.
Yeah, like one thing that has not really been talked about a lot here and there, but not a lot, is that Duren shot 79% at the line last season. So you talk about the elbow jumper and this and that. You look at his free throw percentage, and it was such a big improvement over his freshman year that I don't see why he wouldn't be able to add that to his game, right? That's one of the numbers you look at when you project whether or not a player could shoot. And 79% has got to be amongst the best rates among any big in the league, I would have to guess.
Well, and I think where this really comes into play is if teams want to trap Cade. If Cade is who I think the three of us think he is, teams are going to start to trap him and make other people beat them in the ball screen. So can JD catch, out of that trap and then dribble into a elbow jumper, or take 1-2 dribbles like you're talking about, Shawn, and get all the way to the rim? Or then if they take him away, can he make the read and make the pass? And so I think just all of that aspect of it, even out of a ball screen, or like you're saying, keeping the advantage when he is on the weak side, spacing the floor or being a threat isn't just swing and then shoot a three, but can you attack off the bounce and keep the defense in scramble in some way? So I'm still more adamant about the defense. But offensively, I thought he was a skilled big coming in, Shawn. Like that was kind of my scout on him even before the Pistons drafted him. I kind of want to see that come to fruition in terms of what I would like to see offensively.
No, for sure. I know Omari, you saw, and Bryce, you saw this. Omari, you saw this up close. There were moments where he would put the ball on the floor and it'd show actual legitimate ball skill, right? I mean, he wasn't asked to do that a lot. And I'm not saying they need to lean on that as a first or second option. But God, if you just have a little bit of an offensive bag in this day and age with the way things are spaced, I mean, again, Jokic and Embiid, these guys are anomalies, right? There are a few of those guys in the league. Actually, there are only two of those guys. But, Davis can score, I guess, with his back to the basket too. And there are a few others. But yeah, just being out in space, knowing how to handle yourself on the offensive side, crashing the glass. I mean, obviously, he still needs to be a lob threat. Right, just rolling off of Cunningham or Ivey. That's the other thing you want to look for with Ivey, right?
1 second, Omari. I want to ask, while we're on Duren, Shawn, I want to ask you about the big room in general. So where are you kind of with that? Obviously, I think we all expect Harris to start with Duren. What do you see coming off the bench? Like, do you think they're going to play Stu? And I don't think Paul Reed was on this roster the last time you joined us. Is Stu kind of the super sub at both the 4 and the 5? Are those guys playing together? Are you starting Stu sometimes? Like, how do you see this big man room shaking out? Who do you really value? Or is there any of those other guys you're a little more excited to see maybe than anybody else?
They've got some, I don't want to say dilemma, but they got some things to figure out. Because if you start Harris and you're going to put Stewart over there, then Harris is guarding threes. And can Harris guard threes at this point?
Probably not.
So that's an issue. We know Stewart can guard fours, but he's almost better guarding fives in some way, but he can shoot some. I don't know. Do you lean into the shooting? I think you probably at least try. I don't know who you put over there. I mean, I guess you could go, if you want to go the opposite way and you want to move away from the shooting, you go Thompson. And then Harris is guarding the fours and Thompson's guarding the 3 or the 2. Whoever's the better player on that night, the 3 or the 2, that's who Thompson takes and Ivey takes the other one. He's big enough at 6'4", right, to stay with some wings that aren't super prolific. I mean, threes. So, I mean, you could go, but if Thompson's going to start, then Duren definitely has to get some buckets, and Harris has got to shoot. And then obviously Ivey's got to shoot. I mean, he's kind of the key, right? Because if Ivey can shoot, then you have more flexibility on the front line, to me.
And I was going to ask you about Ivey because, well, one, you look at the way the roster is set up, and it seems like he's probably going to end up being the lead ball handler when Cade sits. The only other guy who can really handle the ball at that guard spot is Marcus Sasser. But we talk a lot about how the additional vets, the shooting can help Cade. How do you see this helping J.I.? I don't know if he starts. I don't know if he comes off the bench, but regardless, it seems like there's going to be, around 18 minutes a night where he's in command of the offense.
Oh, absolutely. How much did we talk about this last year, that those two weren't staggered? So assuming they're going to be, right? So assuming they're going to be staggered this year, he's going to be out there with some combination of Fontecchio, Harris, Beasley, the Hardaway. Who am I missing? There's Sasser, maybe, right? I mean, obviously Stewart, I think maybe, I wouldn't surprise me at all if he got a little bit better shooting from 3. I know it's a catch and shoot. He's a catch and shoot guy, but I would think that would help Ivey, right, in the second unit to have a little bit better spacing, because then he can, that first step. Speaking of finishing though, I'm sure that's a big thing with Bryce, with Ivey, right? That young fella is, he gets there whenever he wants. I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head of what he finishes at, but it needs to get better.
It did improve. This is via B-ball reference anyway, at least just 0 to 3 feet. It did improve from his rookie to his sophomore year. I think it was the beginning of last year, he had really figured it out, there was a stretch where he was really good at it and then it kind of went down. Let's take a break. When we come back, Mari, let's stay on Jaden Ivey just a little bit. And then we probably need to get into the young guys before we let Shawn go. But we'll get into that right after this short break.
All right, we're back with segment 2. And I do have one last question on Ivey before we talk about some of the young guys. But you talk about surrounding him with shooting in the second unit, which, of course, just with last year's roster construction, he didn't always have. I thought he regressed as a playmaker a little bit last year compared to his rookie season. And, people talk about, the minute situation with Monty and this and that. I don't know exactly what you attribute that to, but do you still see Ivey as, I guess, the type of player who could become a true lead ball handler, or do you still see him as more of that combo guard mode?
When we say true lead ball handler, I mean, to me, that means you're leading the team, and he doesn't need to be that. But can he handle that role as when Cade's on the bench, or on occasional possessions when they're out there together? I mean, I think he can. The other thing that he regressed was, maybe not regressed, but he just didn't do as much. You mentioned the playmaking, the secondary playmaking. Shoot, it was the lead playmaking at the end of his rookie year because Cunningham wasn't playing, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, no, that's right.
No,
yeah.
right.
So he was. I'm with you. He did lose some of that. Who knows what happened with all the psychological dominoes of last year from the start, being behind Killian and all that sort of stuff. Just the relationship he had with Monty. Yeah, we don't need to rehash all that. But I remember toward the end of his rookie year, him getting to 14, 16 feet and pulling up. And we didn't see a lot of that this past year, because that takes a certain kind of confidence. And I think he lost some of that. That's not necessarily all his fault. Maybe none of it's his fault. I don't know. I mean, maybe some. I guess you got to take responsibility for yourself. But still, I'd like to see that too, not just the secondary playmaking and not just the 3-point shooting. I mean, he's got his quickness and pull up. I thought that looked somewhat promising toward the end of his rookie year.
Yeah, for the numbers did go down 16 to the 3-point line. They cut in half in terms of the percentage of his attempts from there. He's right around, he's 41% 10 to 16 feet, 44% 16 feet to the 3-point line. So it's not, great, but it's not bad. Like, it's definitely something he needs in his game, because you mentioned the first step, Shawn. People are just going to back off of him because he's so fast and they know they can't stay in front of him. So they're going to have to back off of him. Be remiss not to mention his defense as well. Would like to see it take another step also, along with everything else he's doing. What are your thoughts on his? I thought he got a little bit better, but yeah. What about the young guys, Shawn? Ron Holland, you got to see a little bit at Summer League. Bobby Klintman, obviously, I think was a guy that really shined. If you have Dennis Jenkins' thoughts, I'm sure the fan base will love that. He was a guy that people really liked from Summer League. Obviously, start with Ron and what you felt like you saw from him, and maybe where you see him standing in the rotation right now.
Well, first of all, it's just funny to say the young guys. They're all young, right? I mean,
yeah, that's fair.
It's just, they were differentiating it in this way. It's just, I mean, this tells you where the team's at, right? Why they won, they won 14 games last year. They're not as young now. And that's, I mean, obviously that's probably as important as anything else. Holland. I like his effort. I mean, that was the scout. That's what the Pistons sold draft night. Langdon talked about that. From what I saw in Summer League, you can definitely see that. I mean, the shooting and all that sort of stuff has a ways to go to me. But he's got an NBA body. I like the way he crashes the glass. There's a fearlessness about him. I mean, to me, he's got to be part of the rotation at least a little bit, right? I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm going to be completely wrong here. I don't quite see Thompson level of people can say, wait a second, he couldn't shoot. He didn't know, he's some health stuff. I don't know. When Thompson was healthy, you felt it in a way that you were like, he needs at least 20 minutes, right? And you felt that fairly quickly. Mari and I have talked about this over and over and over. The game that he went down, they were playing the Mavericks. Luka was doing everything he could to get that young fella off of him. Is Holland going to come in and do that?
He's not that level of defender, Shawn.
I don't think so. Maybe he's got a little more offensive polish in terms of just getting buckets. Thompson's probably a better cutter. He's got just as good a feel and all that on the offensive end. But yeah, so I wouldn't expect that. So maybe you can't quite justify as many minutes. But don't you all think he's going to need to be on in at least part of the rotation because you want to develop him?
It's tough because they have depth at the forward spots that they haven't had. So you kind of go down the list and, it looks as though they're going to have to really squeeze Ron Holland in if he's going to be in there, especially at the forward spots. You have Fontecchio, you have Tobias Harris, Isaiah Stewart still plays some for a star.
I'd say if you want to scale down at all, one of those guys, like you could play one of those guys at the 3 or play 2 guards and Cade is quote unquote your 3. Like there's a lot of options. Feel like guys, maybe he's the 11th man, Omari, and like whenever somebody's injured or misses a game or needs a rest night, then he's the guy that gets in the rotation off the bench.
Yeah, he's going to have some DMPs, I would think. And you're right. Not everybody's going to play 82 games. So there's going to be opportunity for him. And maybe he gets out there and he's such a good hustler. And maybe he has a certain kind of way about, coaches, this, Bryce, as well as anybody, right? You carry yourself and you play a certain way, even if you're not filling up a box score necessarily or doing some things that the casual fans might not see as much. Coaches fall in love with that. It's hard to articulate.
Yeah, no, there's a certain level of trust, right? Like anybody who's been around the team, you can tell. I mean, a lot of times kids say coaches have favorites. I'm always like, yeah, we do. The ones that, that you can trust, that, the old, show up on time, stay after, hard work, blah, blah, all the coach speak. But there is a certain level of you just get a certain vibe with some players, and that gives those players more chances and opportunities, or every opportunity that presents itself, Shawn, goes to that player because you're trying to give him a chance. You trust them.
And I would think that he's going to have some nights where he earns some of those kind of minutes. I mean, I would be surprised if he didn't. And who knows? I mean, he shoots a little bit, right? I mean, he's got a knack for getting into the lane and scoring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so Wes brings up a good point. Who's number 10? I guess I'm staggering Ivey into the second unit as a 9-man rotation. So yeah, then it would be like 10 would be Holland. My bad on that. Technically it'd be number 10. But yeah, I don't know. Omari, where are you at with Ron? I have another question for Shawn on Ron, but Omari, you have anything else?
No, you could go into that, Shawn.
Shawn, we've talked a little bit about, okay, let's say Ron's not getting a ton of minutes, right? He gets 10 minutes here, 8 minutes there, DNP here. Do you see any value for him going down and playing with the crews? And if he did, what's the role down there? Is it, hey, go be a more efficient bucket getter than what we saw when you were playing with the Ignite? Is it play this role player role where prove that you like take 10 catch and shoot threes every night? Is there a value to that? Because I find myself wavering all of a sudden on what I see in terms of value of the G League.
I mean, there can be. It's hard sometimes with lottery picks set on down. I mean, it just depends on the individual player and their attitude and what they would, how they would handle that. I don't know. I think the organization likes him enough that they're going to want to give him a decent opportunity to earn a few minutes, right? Yeah. I mean, and then practice, because they got a young team. So you're going to, I think there's still a lot of value in practice. I know once the season gets going, you don't practice that much, but I'm with you. That's a tough one. But I just, the way he is on the court, and I know we just saw a couple of summer league games. I think it was just 2. Was it just 2 even? Did he play maybe 3? I can't remember, Omari. But you feel like they're going to want to give him an opportunity.
And going through the roster, once you get past Cade, Ivey, Tech, and West wrote this down, Tobias, Duren, THJ, Beasley, Asar, and Stu. And you essentially have Ron Holland, Sasser, and Paul Reed, competing for minutes for that 10th spot. So it could be matchup dependent. Like you said, there's going to be injuries too. So there is a good chance we could see Ron Holland pick up a decent amount of minutes.
Yeah, for the same reason Reed's going to play here and there, right? I mean, Reed's a veteran version. I don't want to say he's a version of Holland, but Reed gets after it. That's valuable.
That also, so that's 12, 13 players. That's 12 players. That's leaving out Wendell Moore. And then Bobby Klintman is the other one. Obviously, there's an open roster spot. Seems like they're probably going to carry that into the regular season. We plan on doing our all lineups episode next week. So Trajan, please don't make any moves for a month or so that episode can stay longer than last year where they traded for Boyan right after we did it. But Shawn, Bobby Klintman thoughts, he shot the ball really well. I think he plays a position as like a forward 4-man that this organization hasn't had the last few years. I think can be really value. Have any overwhelming thoughts on the Pistons' 2nd round pick from this past draft? Shawn, thoughts on Bobby Klintman?
That's this, what, you could see a world where, boy, I don't want to wish anybody. Harris needs a night off. Fontecchio needs a night off. Somebody catches a cold, whatever. I don't want to wish any or even bring into the verbalize any kind of injury situation because you don't want to speak that into existence. But there's going to be a night in January or December or wherever, and you give him a look and his shooting, maybe he goes out there and makes a couple of buckets, and then that leads to a couple of more minutes or another look. I don't think he's going to be part of the regular rotation, but I could see him with a few nights with a couple of shots.
Shawn, looking at what the Pistons need to accomplish overall next season, and I guess I don't know what they need to accomplish next season beyond improving from last year. But let's phrase it this way: how would you define success for the Pistons next season? We're sitting here a year from now, and last season was very clearly a momentum builder, and there's some sense of optimism. But that's to happen next season to basically wash away some of the taste of last season to get this thing back on track.
Well, I mean, the fans probably don't like it. I don't know, 25 wins. That's 11 more wins. That's a nice improvement, right? It's just 25 is not a good season in terms of the, relative to the rest of the NBA, right? It's not really a good season. But if you just can keep in mind where they were, and, I think 25 wins, 30 would be a great season to me for them. And maybe hang around the edge of that 10th seed for a bit.
Yeah, if they went 30, now you're talking about maybe what Orlando was a couple seasons ago, right? Or Indiana a couple seasons ago, where you can see them being maybe a move or two off from really contending.
Absolutely.
Well, that gives you the confidence. Then maybe you go out and you do make a move for a veteran piece that's a number 2 or number 3 option, whatever you feel like you need. Because we are doing the lineups episode next week, Shawn, where would you go with the starting lineup right now? Like, obviously, it starts with Cade. I've mentioned, I'll throw mine to you because, just to get you, I've gone Cade, Ivey, Tech, Harris, and Duren because I think they have to prioritize J.I. and J.D. this year and really find out what those guys are as they're a little later. I know a lot of people don't like that because that's bringing Asar off the bench. You can always stagger things. I would stagger Ivey into the second unit. Would you have a different one? Would you like seeing Asar in the starting lineup or maybe somebody else?
Unless he showed a lot this summer in terms of his jump shot with Thompson, that's going to get a little bit better. I don't know that he'll ever be a shooter, but I like that lineup. That's the lineup I was going to suggest. You could maybe make it a little matchup dependent if you need his defense. You know what I mean? If you're playing Dallas or trying to think, if you're playing Philly and, you don't want Paul George to shoot 5 threes in the first 10 minutes, first 6, 7 minutes of the game. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how flexible that can cause issues if you don't have a consistent starting lineup. But I'm with you. I would try Fenticchio at first. And if Thompson shows that he's ready and he comes in, I mean, that'll be evident fairly quickly.
No doubt. Shawn, I know you have to get going here in a bit. I would hate to send you off if I would ask you one Lions question. Just I know we're in the thick of that, and hopefully this isn't the hardest death after last game. But just what's your opinion on the team right now in general? What have you seen for the first 2 games? And do you think fans need to panic about Jared Goff at all?
I mean, Goff has not looked like he did last year for sure. He did have a few games where he did not play well last year, right? And yes, there's that. To me, first of all, the defense looks better. They look better in every way. It's not a dominant defense, but that's a pretty good offense. Tampa had, and it's hard to say with the Rams now because they got lit up. Of course, they didn't have their 2 receivers when they got torched in Arizona, and those 2 receivers and Paca and Coop are pretty good. To me, the single thing is I don't think the offensive line is protecting Goff in the same way. And I'm not sure they're mashing in the middle of the line for the run game in the same way. And they look a little different. We'll see what happens with them, but I'd keep an eye on that. Jonah Jackson, I know he missed time last year. That guy was really, really good. And, at some point, I mean, I don't know about Ragnow, Graham Glasgow's up there. Who knows? Right? Sewell is obviously a monster. Decker's still really good, but that's the biggest difference to me is the offensive line isn't quite as dominant in his first 2 weeks. And that's an issue. And I think because of that, Ben Johnson and Goff, those guys haven't been able to figure out a play calling rhythm,
No doubt. And last one, who's going to finish with more receiving yards between Jameson Williams and Laporta?
Jamison.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah,
I like
Jamison.
that.
Yeah, I went low. I was in a betting pool with the night of the first game against the Rams, and I picked 700 yards, and he's got close to 200 already, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's going to feast this year.
All right, Shawn, we got to get you out of here, but thank you so much. Obviously, we'll have you back on, I'm sure, very soon into the season.
Start of the season, whatever, before the start. Yeah. After we see some camp and some preseason, for sure.
Appreciate you, Shawn.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. We'll have you back on. We'll talk to you soon. Everybody else, we're going to go to a short break, and when we get back, we'll answer some of your questions and finish off the episode.
All right. We are back with segment 3, and we do have a few questions here.
We're going to talk about the Chiefs first, right? Since we talked about the Lions.
Okay. So we can talk about the Chiefs for sure.
No, we are
not.
We can.
Yes, we can. No, we can talk about the Chiefs.
No, we're not doing it. Go to RB Nesbitt.
All right. RB Nesbitt. What up, though? Don't tell me none of y'all are leaving too. We're right here, Rodney. We're not going anywhere.
Say that real quick. I just want Rodney to, I don't think any of us have any plans of doing anything different. I don't have any plans going anywhere else. Omari's, gone through. Here's the thing, Omari, we've gone through too many losing seasons not to stay around for this thing to get turned around. You know what I mean? You and I came in the same year, and all we've seen is this rebuild. We got to get at least a 500 season under our belt first, right?
That's what I'm saying. And I have no plans to leave Detroit. I moved back. I love it here. I'm not going anywhere, guys. We're going to be right here next season, breaking down hopefully a few more wins compared to last year. I think about it. We got through last year. That was probably our best traffic year ever, despite how bad it was. So I don't know.
I'm actually scared for this team to be average. I'm terrified of what's going to happen to our listener and viewership if they're not historically bad or don't then spin it into really, really good. I'm terrified that nobody's going to listen to us.
There's nothing to talk about when they're just boring bad, right? So
Kean says, LOL, got to talk about the officiating, Bryce. It was pass interference. There's nothing to talk about.
All right.
I can't talk about the Chiefs because I get way too serious. I've told people, that is my only true fandom, Omari. I am irrational as a Chiefs fan, just like most people are as Lions fans. I respect it. So, all right.
I feel it. And we forgot to talk about Lions Chiefs last week, so I guess we'll just have to revisit another time.
I've told you this, Omari. My biggest fear is a Lions Chiefs Super Bowl. Like I was terrified last year when they were both in the conference championships. I did not want to see that.
That's my biggest hope. Like that's
No.
what I want. I want to see that. That would be great for the pod.
It would be awful. I would probably quit. That would be me.
Be
That would be how I would leave.
We would do.
All right, we can go.
We would do the live show on Super Bowl Sunday.
No, we would not. In Detroit, what if we did a live show in Detroit and the Chiefs lose? I would be. Oh my gosh, I would be insufferable. It'd be so bad.
We would get you an honorary Lions jersey. We would take care of you.
No. Listen, I'm Detroit through and through. I bought in. I've told people that. I stand up for the city. I've been there. We love it. 0% chance.
All right. So I did want to address this from Rodney Nesbitt. When we talk about JD's defense, one thing that is not mentioned is how good he was when Dan Burke was with the team. Early in the season, he was good. Then the ankle injury, and then Burke left. So that parallel's been brought up, a handful of times. I think it's tough for me to sit here and say, well, Dan Burke left and, all of Duren's defensive juice went with him. I think scheme-wise, it's not like Dan Burke took the entire defensive playbook with him. They still had a lot of the same philosophies. But as you mentioned, Duren did have that ankle injury during the fourth game, which I think they lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder. But he tweaked his ankle in that game that he missed the next game against the Trailblazers. And that Blazers game is where they had that collapse. So a lot of things kind of happened at once, honestly, within that stretch. But, I would say the ankle injury probably has at least as much to do with it as, any behind-the-scenes coaching changes.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in general with Dan Burke. I do give the Pistons a little bit of leeway. Like, you bring in a coach to be the defensive coordinator, and when that guy leaves, who takes the reins? And so I hope we see a little, I think that's some of the things and the nuance to how bad last year was, Omari, that doesn't always get talked about, right? You're pretty bad whenever you do what the Pistons did, but there were some other things beyond just lack of talent and even lack of floor spacing that contributed to that. So I think I have hope that with JB coming in, and that's kind of his mindset as a defensive guy. And if you look, I think I looked when he first got hired, you always see at least a little bit of jump on the defensive end from the year before he took over to his first year with the team even. So I'm hoping we see that, and especially individually. I think JD's the one we focus on the most, just because, man, if you had a real anchor of the defense with him, Omari, that would make everybody else's life so much easier.
No, you're in great shape. Let's go to Agridome here. How many wins is a good estimate for this year? 30 wins. What is it going to take to be a contender? How many years? Man, I wish I had these answers.
Define contender. No.
Yeah. I agree with Shawn. I think 25 wins, if you have an 11-game improvement, I know on paper, 25 is nothing to be excited about, or even off paper, probably not anything to be excited about, but that's measurable growth from the year prior. And probably a lot of it is more individual with the players, I think, than any specific win amount, right? Unless they overachieve dramatically, I think more so you want to go in the next season saying, we know what Cade is, we know what more of our young guys are. We have these contracts we can move if needed, and, we can take next steps from there. As far as a contender and how many years, I have no clue. I'm not going to put anything out there. Whatever I say is going to be wrong anyway, so I'm not even going to touch that one.
I mean, Omari, 25 wins would be an improvement over every year since 2018, 2019. 2018, 2019 was 41 and 41. The win total since then, and I know not all of these years were 82 games, 20, 20, 23, 17, 14. 25 wins would be a vast improvement over what we've watched. Now, I think it's important, what YouTube user brings up. It depends on how you get those 25 wins, I think, is going to determine kind of the vibe from the fan base. If it's Tobias having a crazy career year this late in his career, Tim Hardaway Jr. running the offense, Beasley shooting, 45% from three or something like that, it's not as exciting and as encouraging as if it's Cade leading the way and J.I. improving and J.D. improving and Holland showing flashes and those type of things. But I'm expecting anywhere between 25 and 30. I think it's realistic. I think it's possible. And then, as YouTube user says, 25 to 30 wins. And then as Blake Silverman brought up, then you hit the lottery odds and you also get to draft Cooper Flagg. That'd be a heck of a 12 months.
No, it absolutely would be. And to mention, they also won 31 games combined the last two seasons. So you hit 30. And now it sounds even better, right? You just matched your last 2 years in one season. That's pretty good.
That's not bad.
Yeah, Derek Brown, no veteran backup point guard or backup center on the team. Hard to believe. I'm curious about no backup center because I would say Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed, would definitely fit the bill for this team. But no, they don't have a veteran backup point guard, and they could always pivot on that in the middle of the season if they need to. The way this market is shaping up, somebody's going to be there that can be pretty useful for this team.
I believe Fultz and Dennis Smith Jr. are still on the market as we record this episode, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong.
I know Fultz is. I'm not positive about Dennis Smith Jr., but quick Google, I don't see any news on him. So
yeah, so I mean, there's guys available for that. Yeah, both. Wes is giving me the thumbs up. Both those guys are still available.
Yeah,
and so like there's, like you say, there's some things that I agree with you. I'm not as worried. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I wouldn't be the first time about the center position with Stu and Paul Reed. I wouldn't have minded a backup point guard, a vet backup point guard that could just slow things down and run the show in the minutes when Ivey maybe is out of control. I still think Ivey should run the second unit in staggered minutes away from Cade, but there are probably times, or what if one of those guys rolls an ankle, Omari? Like, who's running the show if Ivey misses some games or in non-Ivey minutes? Like, Cade's not going to play 48 minutes, or, Cade's probably not playing 82 games. So who's running the point guard minutes outside of that? Like, sure, you can do it with J.I., but it'd be really nice to have a vet backup point guard in that situation. This maybe comes down to like Sasser, like how people feel about Sasser, but I know I don't feel like he's a true lead guard in that sense. I don't know where you stand, but I think we're on the same wavelength as that.
Yeah, I mean, the way the roster is set up, they wouldn't have any insurance at all or proven insurance if Jaden and Ivey were to go down. As you said, Cade can't play all 82 games or 48 minutes. Looking at the roster, you could just say that they're going to give Sasser and Ivey every opportunity to show that they can earn those jobs and hold those jobs down. But regardless, you figure at some point if they do have injuries, they would have no choice but to bring in Markelle Fultz or Dennis Smith Jr. just to keep things rolling. Maybe we could see a little bit of, point Duren, a little bit things. Or a star. Maybe they get super creative. I don't know.
Yeah, and as Kian brings up, like, bring in Fultz without hindering Ivey. Like, the thing with Fultz and Dennis Smith Jr. is like they're non-floor spacers also. So like when we talk about floor spacing and shooters, I know they would be playing with the ball in their hands, but like it still is a little bit of an issue when you bring in somebody that can't shoot the way those two guys can't really shoot.
No doubt. I think we still have a couple.
We have a couple more.
Maybe it's apples and oranges and it's hindsight, but does this team and coach give the Carlisle early 2000s vibe? At least start to tease making the playoffs. I was too young then to get the vibe. I think it's tough to compare anything to that era because you had a Pistons team that, was essentially formed out of, players that other teams didn't want, right? Like you had Ben Wallace, who was a throw-in with I want to say, Duren. I think the Pistons believe pretty strongly in him, but even so, to get Ben Wallace, to get Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, like none of these guys came in with, like the most sterling reputation. So I don't want to compare this team to that. I don't want to compare any Pistons team to any past Pistons team. Sometimes on Twitter, it'll be like, oh, this team has bad boys or going to work or this and that. And no, I think this team needs to actually start winning some games before we compare them to eras where they were more successful than they are now.
And just to be like, people know I wasn't a Pistons fan growing up. So I watched the going to work team. I also feel like that was the most perfectly constructed team that I can remember. Like just in terms of all of these guys fitting together in their roles, it was just so perfectly constructed compared to even teams that just like had the top end superstar, top 1, 2, 3 player in the league. It's just hard to replicate that. It truly is. Eric Manuel asked, were we tanking last season? I don't think the Pistons were trying to be that bad last year. That wasn't the draft to do it. If you told me they were tanking last year, the YouTube user says, no, we just sucked. I kind of agree with that. If the strategy was to tank last year, I wholeheartedly disagree with that strategy because from day one, that was never the draft to tank for. And so to me, it would have made zero sense.
Yeah, also, they don't pay Monty Williams all that money to tank. I don't think they fired.
I know they didn't technically fire Troy Weaver, but you don't hire above Troy Weaver if you knew you were tanking last year and then they successfully tanked. Like if they knew that's what the goal was, they wouldn't have been upset that the team only won 14 games. So I don't think so. YouTube user asked, or said, Bryce, something about getting a Piston scout. Yes, if you can get me a job being a scout for the Pistons, please help me there, but not sure that's in the card. Yeah, I would actually love Bryce to get a job as a Piston scout. Yeah, that would be a dream job. We're going to do Wes's last here, Omari.
Yeah, let's do Wes's last one here.
Who is more likely to be the number 2 and possibly number 1 scorer in the future? Jaden Ivey or Ron Holland?
I feel like you got to go Ivy just because he's shown more, right? Like, I think it's tough to project Ron, but if I'm predicting which player has the higher long-term ceiling, I'd probably go Ron just because I think he has a little bit of a size and, just towards the advantage as a two-way guy. But you have to give Jaden Ivey the benefit of the doubt at this point, I think.
I mean, I feel like this is a very pro Jaden Ivey podcast in terms of like our belief in JI, at least for one more year, and in what we think this context is going to be. I'll say Ron Holland for the sake of argument, because I've tried to look at from the organization perspective. Trajan didn't draft JI, and Trajan didn't have to draft Ron Holland at number 5. And my feeling, my look from the outside is, I feel like maybe he drafted Ron Holland to be that guy, that maybe Trajan looked at the roster and didn't think he had that guy. And so he swung for the fences with his first pick. We saw how long Troy hung on to his first pick that was in the top 10 and gave him every chance to be successful. So for that reason, I think I believe in JI more as a player, Omari, but I think maybe the organization gives Ron more chances to be that guy than they do JI. And for that reason, I think it evens the playing field.
No doubt. Yeah, I think it for me, it's really a timeline type deal, right? Like, I think long term, you go 4 years. Yeah, Ron Holland's just got some stuff in his bag that a lot of players don't have. He's 6'6" with legit size. I think the motor he plays with, those are all things that are pretty hard to match, I think, in any sense. And he was really good defensively. Well, not really good defensively, but he was good enough defensively in summer league to make me think that he'll at least be average on that end sooner rather than later.
That was his rep coming out of high school. I mean, I remember when I started scouting him when he was at Duncanville, was this kid plays super hard, like elite level defense. I didn't see that as much whenever I started watching it, but that's always been the rep with Ron Holland, is he plays extremely hard. And that's maybe the argument. This doesn't answer Wes's question specifically as much, but like the real two-way potential that Ron offers, I think is higher than Jaden Ivey. I think Jaden's striving to be a neutral defender, where Ron is striving to be an impactful defender. And there is a major difference between those two things.
And they'll have different expectations as far as that, I think.
Yeah.
As well. That's the last one, I believe.
Yeah, but 50 minutes. Guys, I think starting next week, we're going to get back into an hour. We're doing the all lineup one, which means the Pistons will roster the 15th spot on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday next week, whenever the day after we record is, because that's what they do to us. But yeah,
that'll be our last episode before training camp too, because training camp again opens September 30th. So then the week after that, I believe they play Milwaukee. So we've got training camp coming very soon, and we've got real basketball coming very soon, which is exciting.
Yeah. YouTube user says Ron was very active on defense, but not a good defender. I would agree with that. Very active, but he doesn't have the fundamentals down yet. So all lineup episode coming. Maybe we'll try to get a guest on there before the first preseason game. And then we get to get after it, Omari, with preseason games. We get to start breaking down real basketball in a sense. A few weeks later, we get regular season. Hopefully we get the same start as last year's regular season, and then not the 28 game stretch after.
Yeah, I know my head's going to be spinning this time next week just with all the change that went this offseason. And like, I spent some time off, and then you get back and you realize, even though the roster is mostly the same, the vast majority of the behind the scenes has like changed this offseason, which I think is pretty exciting as well. So we've got some fun episodes coming up. Absolutely.
Yes, we do. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for watching live. I can't imagine doing an episode not live without you guys in the comments. So thank you guys so much, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Continue to join us. Tell a friend about it. Help us grow into the #1 Pistons pod out there. And subscribe, rate, review, all of that stuff wherever you're listening and watching. And listen to the Pin Down over on the DBB YouTube channel with Wes and Blake Silverman. Omari, take it away, my guy.
A big thanks, as always, to our audio producer, Robin Chan, and big thanks to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and also big shout out to Wes, as always, and we'll talk to you all next week.